All right, I'd like to go ahead and call to order the June 1st, 2022 Gig Harbor Parks Commission meeting. Starting with a roll call. If you could just say here after I call your name. Ben Coronado, Parks Commission Chair. Louise Tiemann, Vice Chair.
Here.
Will Appleton.
Here.
Georgina Armstrong.
Here.
Stace Gordon.
Here.
And is it Les McCallum?
Yep. Here.
And then from city staff, we have Parks Manager Matthew Keogh. We have Public Works Assistant Terry Garrison.
Here.
And City Clerk Josh Stecker.
I'm here.
Hi, Josh. All right, and as far as I know, let's see. Oh, dinner is served.
Sorry, I didn't have lunch. I'm starving.
All right, that's all good. Let's see, public comment. Oh, and it looks like here comes Stephanie Lyle. We'll give her a second to get connected there. Before we move on, let's get all that out of the way. And Parks Commission member, hi, Stephanie Lyle. You say here.
Hello, I'm here now.
All right, thanks. All right, everyone accounted for. Well, first off, yeah, welcome to the Gig Harbor Parks Commission meeting. If there's any participants out there, we have a public, it doesn't look like there is, public comment available during this meeting as well. But if there's any agenda items you'd like to speak on, we'll open that up if there's anybody there, but there's not. So we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. If there is a motion to approve the agenda as written.
So moved.
All right. In a
Second.
All right, and Georgina seconds. Okay. All in favor of approving the agenda as written, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on with the agenda. We'll start off with the introduction of the new members. We had Les and Stace get appointed recently at the May 9th City Council meeting. So we go ahead and like to welcome them and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, and we'll introduce ourselves as well. And welcome to the Parks Commission, and we look forward to working with you guys. So Les, you want to go ahead and start off? Maybe just a little bit about yourself, what got you interested in the Parks Commission, maybe how long you've lived here, and maybe what's your favorite park?
Okay. Les McCallum and my wife, Peggy, we live in downtown Gig Harbor at the Edgewater condos, but we have lived in with a Gig Harbor address for nearly 40 years, but just not in the city, 7 years in the city. Recently retired. Peggy is a retired school teacher. I think had one of the commissioner's children, in fact. And my interest essentially is growing by the day as I see more things and so forth. But it was an opportunity to get involved in something that I think I have some expertise in, and that is development of policy and governing and so forth, because I have a master's in public administration with an emphasis in city management. Although I never did work for a city. Most of my career was with a company called Pearson, which is a large publishing and testing company, and particularly focused on teacher certification. So we love being downtown. We can practically reach out and touch 10 parks, tour within 100 yards and so forth, and are big time supporters.
Awesome. Great to have you. Great to have you. Yeah, and you guys are familiar with, was your wife a teacher in the district, you said?
Voyager, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Well, happy to have you guys. And then Stace, you want to go ahead and take a moment?
Sure. I've been in Gig Harbor about 6 years, I guess. So relatively new compared to a lot of folks that I meet, but been in the Northwest for 25 years, Portland and the Newport, Oregon coast and that kind of thing. And so I just recently retired about a month ago, and my career is mostly in human resources for the last 25 years or so. And in a timber and paper industry, Georgia Pacific and West Rock here, Tacoma's paper mill. And so a lot of experience with people issues, which are always dynamic and change constantly. So looking to get involved with the community and give back. This is the place we're going to stay. Long term, we have no intentions of moving anywhere else. So wanted to get more involved with the community. So we moved last summer from within Gig Harbor. And before right now we're off Reed Road, but we were close to Crescent Creek Park in the past, and enjoyed going there and taking visitors there, and just a sort of the diversity of activities at that park, pretty good size. But just anxious to learn more about what's going on and what are the opportunities and what are the challenges and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, great to have you again, Stace. I met you the other day at the open house for the sports complex. So yeah, it was nice to be able to talk with you a little bit and get that face-to-face interaction that we so desperately miss.
Zoom works, but it's just not the same. Yeah.
Right. I would like to take a moment and introduce myself to you guys as well. Maybe the other parks commissioners would as well. Just give you guys some background information on where the rest of us are coming from as well. I just got appointed for my third term on the Parks Commission. I come from a background of urban studies, my degree, and I run a business with my family. We do home inspections revolving around like building science and air pressure and stuff like that. I also recently started helping on the substitute teaching. You know, they put out a call to action for the community, and I got a little flexibility in my schedule. So I got voluntold to go ahead and put my hat in the ring on that. So I've been doing a little bit of that, and that's been really a new perspective to the teaching profession. a lot of respect to those teachers, because that is not an easy task.
Tough job, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and then I'm lifelong resident, been here for decades, and I grew up here and I well vested in the community. So if anybody else like take an opportunity to introduce themselves to the new members, feel free. If not, we can move on. But maybe Luis would go next.
Hi, nice to meet you virtually, and I think I met you, Stace, in person the other day.
Yeah.
But I've been on the Parks Commission for I'm not sure how long. Ben, do you remember? It's a couple of years. Actually, I started right before the pandemic started, because we didn't have, I think I only had 2 in-person meetings, and then pandemic happened. But I've been engaged in parks for a long time, both in Tacoma and here, a lot with the Ansich Park here, and it's near and dear to my heart. My kids were paddlers, and I'm dragon boating, and paddling is good. I'm a financial person in my day job, currently the financial director for Parks and Rec for Metro Parks Tacoma. So I'm pretty committed on parks at this point.
Georgina, would you like to take an opportunity?
Sure, yeah. I'm a relative newcomer to the Parks Commission, January, and also to Gig Harbor in July. Live at Heron's Key. Lived in California for quite a few years. Was born and raised in London. Mostly lived in the Bay Area. Went to Carmel, got involved in city governance there, very much into climate change, mitigation and adaptation. And then spent a little time when we first came here, actually in Lacey, Olympia, and then came to Gig Harbor. And I owned a school for 37 years. It was from preschool through 6th grade. So it was I also started an infant center, so it was really infants through 6th grade. So that was a really very rewarding time of my life. And this is too. I'm enjoying being on the Parks Commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Will or Stephanie?
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I guess you
Go for it,
go, Steph. Did I unmute before you? All right. Hi, Stace. Hi, Les. Nice to meet you. William Appleton, I've been in Gig Harbor for a little more than 20 years, so definitely a newcomer. I think around here, you just have to have about 3 generations kind of behind you before you can claim any real relevance. But work in city government, have for the last 20 years. Tip of the hat to you, Stace, or Gordon, right? No,
Stace is first thing, yeah.
Stace. Okay, yeah. Stace, grew up in Fort Bragg, Georgia Pacific Lumber Mill, pulled green chain back in the day. Don't know if you were an HR guy for him back then, but wish someone like you might have warned me not to do that.
I've been to Fort Bragg 100 times.
Yeah, Mill's gone now. Mill's gone.
Oh, I know. I was part of closing it down, actually.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Okay, right on. Well, we got some catching up to do.
We do. How about that?
So yeah, there you go. Small world, but very, very interested in building community. Love Gig Harbor. Don't ever plan on, might leave for a short time, but don't ever plan on divesting. And so this is a fantastic community, and I just want to contribute what I can to help out. It's a good group of people too. Thanks.
Well, all right, Stephanie, have at it.
Okay, well, hey, Les and Stace, it's great to have you on the commission. I'm Stephanie, the director of the Harbor History Museum, and a long time Gig Harbor. I grew up on the east side, which is where all the rough and tumble kids live, but went to schools here and the whole thing. But anyway, I've gone away and come back a number of times, so I kind of feel like Gig Harbor has me by the ankles. And it's a great place to be and to live. I've seen a lot of changes. Obviously, my interest in Parks Commission is not only seeing open land preserved, but to see the historic structures and whatnot that are throughout our parks preserved and cared for as well. So we try to lend our expertise here at the museum where we can, historic resources, that sort of thing. So it's really fun to be a part of this particular group, because awesome people right here on screen with all of you, and many thanks to all the work that everyone's doing. So that's enough from me for tonight. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for taking the opportunity to share tonight. We do have quite a diverse and well, informed group here. So, hopefully we can provide the city and the community a lot of benefit with what we're doing. So I appreciate you all being a part of this commission and the time invested in it, because it's worthwhile work, I think. And hopefully it has some impact with what we're doing. So yeah, thanks again for volunteering to be a part of this.
Thank you.
And we work, with Matthew Keogh, the parks manager, pretty closely, and Terry Garrison's so great, and she's been, a great part of this Parks Commission for so long. And Josh Stecker, the city clerk, has done really good work. I worked with Josh. Josh, how long have you been with the city now? You're what, 4 years in, 5 years in?
This is just past my 4-year anniversary. So
Nice.
4 years,
Nice.
1 year as the clerk now today.
Sweet. So happy to have all these great people. It's nice to see Gig Harbor attract such great, talent and, people to be a part of and help, run the city day to day, and, get all these great parks and, up and running. And, it's not easy by any means, but, they're very talented people. So appreciate having them. So we'll go ahead and move on to the approval of minutes from our May 4th, 2022 Parks Commission meeting. I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to approve those minutes. If there's a second, we can open up discussion on that if there's any amendments that may be made.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Stephanie. I personally didn't have anything that I noticed. Will, you had brought up something prior to that. Did you notice anything?
No, I was just going through them, and I think Terry kind of confirmed, just looking for opportunities where we can call out specific actions. I think and what I can do maybe is just go back through them and circle a couple things that caught my eye, and that's having not attended the meeting and then reviewing the minutes. There were just a couple things that I noted where I was kind of expecting maybe either to be followed up on or to reported back to the committee, but other than that, good. No changes recommended.
Okay.
I thought
So on
they
that
were
note, yeah, so all in favor, with a second from Stephanie, all in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Nope. All right, The May 4th, 2022 Parks Commission minutes are approved as written. All right. Okay, so on to old business. So the old business item number 1 is the Parks Commission work program. This is a discussion that we've been ongoing for a few months, I feel like, if not longer, maybe approaching that year mark. So the work program is kind of where we're going to focus our time in the future. We've been working on a couple of ideas on how to structure that work plan and how to incorporate some of the things that we worked on in the past through the Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan, which was adopted by City Council, the City Council strategic plan, the capital projects coming down the pipeline, and anything from the mayor or council's directive as well. I mean, granted, this is our work plan, and we're going to send it to council for their feedback and approval. And with the limited time that we do have, I mean, we only meet 12 times a year, for a couple hours. So with that understanding of what a work plan could look like, I think came to the consensus that it was going to be more of a longer term work plan. 2 or 3 years is kind of where the focus would be for the timeline. That way somebody who comes in for a term can kind of see some of these things come to fruition, hopefully, and see them throughout. Because that's one thing that I've certainly learned being a part of this commission, is that these projects take time. And to go through the full vetting process and all that stuff, these projects take time. And the community input is an important part of that, and there's a certain process that needs to be taken throughout that. And so making sure to hit some of those thresholds, and making sure the community is involved throughout the process, and to help facilitate where we can in those projects is kind of where we hope our work program can help and evolve to. So on that note, I would probably like to table this. I hate to table it again, but I would like to table this to for a later meeting. I know Josh has some information he wants to go through with us with the OPMA training. So I just wanted to introduce it and say that's coming, and we should, probably get some focus and hand out to the new members to review, and so they can come with their own ideas and incorporate those into our work plan in the future. But I know we have a full ledger of new business items to discuss as well tonight. Not to dismiss our work plan, but I'm happy to have you guys. And we had put this work plan discussion on hold until we had the full commission, because we thought having the full commission's input was important. So we deliberately tabled it to wait for you guys. So I want you to know that you're going to be an important part of that. And I look forward to that discussion. But for the time being, I would recommend that we do table that for this evening's discussion. Do I need to have a vote on that, or is that just at chair's discretion?
That should be something, that's something that you can table as the chair, unless, anyone else on my,
Yeah, unless there's any opposition.
yeah, discuss it further.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into new business item number 1, the OPMA and commission rules update. And Josh is so kind, and he's going to run through this with us and make sure we're all so well informed and abiding by all the T's and I's are dotted and all that good stuff. So Josh, I'm going to hand that over to you if that's all right.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So my plan tonight was to take you through the Secretary of State's Open Public Meetings Act training, which is a short, I think it's about a 12 or 14-minute video that they do. That video is under construction because the Open Public Meetings Act has undergone a few somewhat significant changes in the last couple of months. So they are redoing their video, and it's not available yet. So we're going to table that one too until your next meeting, probably. So, and I know some of you have probably already seen that video and you've had the training. We've got 2 new people, and Ben owes me another viewing of it. So for the benefit of the board, we will have you all watch it again as soon as it's available. But that will be tonight. Okay.
Can you give us any spoiler alerts?
For the new revisions, it's not going to affect you too much. I think the one that will really affect you, we've already kind of touched on that when we added the public comment to the beginning of this. Now, every regular meeting where you take final action, you're required to take public comment of some kind at that meeting. Final action is kind of a vague term. I don't know how often the Parks Commission takes final action on anything other than maybe doing a formal recommendation to council. But just for practical purposes, we're just going to make it a routine thing that you do at every meeting, that you'll have that public comment period, probably at the beginning of the meeting, so people can chime in if anybody has the urge to do that. That's the main one that will affect you. There's been some other changes as far as remote meetings and emergency meetings, COVID related stuff. And actually I can address that really quickly too, because we just today, the mayor approved a remote meeting policy. So meetings will be remote anytime that Pierce County is in a high transmission status. And we're going by the definition that's provided by the Washington State Department of Health, which is 100 cases per 100,000 per 7 days. And right now, I think we are at 270 for Pierce County. So we're well within the high range right now. So we're still remote. We did drop down below 100, I think, in probably between February and early April. So we do fluctuate below that at times. But as long as we're over that high threshold, we'll just automatically be remote. And if we drop below that at any point, then the mayor she'll make consideration and decide if we can start doing in-person meetings again. So that's the status of that. So for now, it's just business as usual. We'll see you all on Zoom, and I know it's not everyone's favorite, but that's how we're going to be for now.
Thank you.
I am personally a big fan of it. I mean, like I said, I miss the person to person, but the flexibility of Zoom is convenient.
Yeah, I've been in back-to-back meetings like pretty much all day long. So very thankful, trust me.
Wow.
Also, COVID really is going around. Metro's having a round of it. Other places are as well. There's a lot of people getting sick right now, even though they're vaccinated and boosted, and we are all better off in our own homes right now. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. And that's the sentiment that's going around. And even if we drop down below that high threshold, we're still going to be paying attention to how many cases we have in the workplace. And, we're going to take into consideration, your individual concerns about meeting in person and staff's concerns about that. So it won't be an automatic when we drop down to a lower threshold that we're going to come back to in person, but it's a discussion we'll have when we get there.
Gotcha. All right. So no other conversation on the OPMA stuff until next meeting or so?
Yep. But
okay.
I do have council's newly adopted council guidelines. I'm going to share my screen and walk through those with you. I sent out a copy of them all to you. I don't know if you had a chance to read them or not, but we can go through them. And at any point as I'm going through them, if you have any questions, just go ahead and interrupt me and I'll happy to elaborate or discuss. Let me share my screen here. Let's see. Can you all see that okay?
There it goes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is Article 5 of Council's guidelines. The Council's guidelines is their document that they have adopted to kind of govern everything that's in their purview. So it gives the structure for their meetings, how they communicate, how they want staff to communicate with them, basically a variety of subjects. And what they've added in this latest update is this Article 5, which is going to apply to advisory boards. Advisory boards is the catch-all term that we use for all of the advisory commissions. So you'll see in section 5.2, we list the ones that we currently have: Arts Commission, Civil Service, Design Review, Lodging Tax, Parks Commission, Planning Commission, Salary Commission. So really any group that is established by council that is just an advisory body to council, these rules are going to apply to in general. These rules will be superseded by anything that's in the municipal code that doesn't align with this. So there will be exceptions in the municipal code. And then some of these committees are also established by RCW and state law. The Parks Commission is not one of those committees. So there's no RCWs overseeing the Parks Commission. The Parks Commission is simply created as an advisory body to council for be used at council's discretion, essentially. So all of the advisory boards are in the formed by ordinance in the municipal code. So there's a municipal code chapter for it of Parks Commission. I'm guessing that most of you are familiar with that. It kind of outlines the scope of the Parks Commission and what your responsibilities are. if we want to get into that, I can walk through that with you, but that's been established in the code for quite a while. Basically just saying you're advisory to council, and then you support and partner with staff on some of the administrative things that staff does related to parks. That's section 5.3 in this guidelines. It just outlines the scope of work that's defined for each advisory board. And then this last paragraph in 5.3, this is pretty relevant to what you're doing now. It says each advisory board may develop an annual work plan within the jurisdiction and area of responsibility assigned to the board in the Gig Harbor Municipal Code. All work plans must be approved by the city council and carried out under the direction of the mayor. So one of the things you'll see as we go through this chapter or this article, it refers to the discretion of the mayor or the direction of the mayor. That's kind of simply the formal way of saying that we need to make sure that we have staff capacity to do it. The mayor's responsibility is to oversee staff and make sure that staff has a manageable workload, and that everything that we're taking on is something that can be balanced with all of the other things in our work plan. So as we go through here, anytime you see that it needs to be done at the discretion of the mayor, that's not to say that it needs to be some formal ruling by the mayor to do it. It's just that it needs to be done with some kind of oversight, so that we know that staff's workload can handle what's being done. Residency requirements. This just broadly applies to all of our boards. It just says you need to live in Pierce County, somewhere between the Tacoma Narrows Bridge and the Purdy Bridge. The municipal code for the Parks Commission has narrowed that down even further. So for the Parks Commission, you have to live in city limits or in the UGA. And I believe it's up to 2 Parks Commissioners can live in the UGA. Ben?
Yeah, well, you probably were about to say it, but with the Les and Stace joining us, are they both city residents as well? Are we at full city at this point?
I think everyone is within city limits. I don't believe any of you are in the UGA, if I remember correctly.
Awesome. Okay.
I think I am in the UGA, but I'm not within the city limit proper. But
That might be Stace. I think I remember looking at that when we did your application.
Okay.
Appointment process. This should be familiar to. Oh, excuse me. This should be familiar to most of you. It's really hasn't changed that much. There used to be a city council committee that was defined in code as the board and commission candidate review committee. And they did all of the interviews for people that were appointed. I think all of you were appointed by that committee. That committee doesn't technically formally exist anymore. So now when we have new applicants and we have vacancies to fill, council will be convening an ad hoc committee of 3 of their members. So it will be probably 3 different members each time we have to do interviews. So not the same committee for year after year. That's really about the only change. The function will be the same. They'll do the same interviews, probably even ask the same questions. The chair will join the meetings. Designated staff person will be there. And that interview process should be pretty much the same. That committee will make the recommendation, and then council will do the formal approval, just like all of you went through. Appointment terms. Terms are going to be for 3 years each. I think that's already in the municipal code for the Parks Commission, so that shouldn't be anything different than you already know. If your term expires and you don't want to renew for another 3-year term, there's a provision in here that you can stay on the Parks Commission past your expiration date if we haven't found someone to replace you. That's just at your discretion. If you'd like to continue on for a few more months, that option is there. Vacancies. The key thing here that council has added is the removal process has been streamlined for all of the commissions so that it's done by council action. So council can make a decision to remove someone if they feel it's in the best interest of the city. That's always been their prerogative, but it's never really been stated anywhere. The other thing that's been changed now is that we've added a provision where the mayor can remove someone unilaterally. If the mayor determines that you are in violation of the municipal code in some way, or if you're not adhering to these guidelines, I don't really anticipate that we're ever going to need to use that, but this option is there in case we run into a situation where we have commissioners that won't cooperate with the rules and aren't listening and it just gives the mayor the ability to do that, so council doesn't have to do it in their meeting and, you know, bring someone out into the light and make a spectacle of it. So that's the provision. That's the reason for this provision here. And I honestly, I don't think we'll ever need to even worry about using this, but it's there in case it becomes a situation. Section 5.8 is expectation of advisory board members. I don't think this will be anything too outside of the norm for you. Regular attendance is expected. We expect you to be prepared for the meeting, so you know, be familiar with what's on the agenda. If you have questions about it, reach out to staff and try to understand maybe what's coming forward if you need to. Just basically be a part of the committee, be a part of the discussion, and there's an emphasis in here on recognizing that the compromise is something that the committees need to work on to reach a consensus in their decision. And then this section also just has a provision that says if you're not able to complete your term, just let the city clerk know, and we can find someone to replace you. Any questions so far as I'm going along? I don't want to just ramble on if there's something that pops up, but I'm hoping that this is not too far outside of what you already are doing in your committee. Chair and vice chair. This details the duties of the chair. Essentially, the chair is the person who presides at the meetings, calls the meetings to order, processes the motions, makes rulings on Robert's rules and points of order, facilitates the debate. The chair also has the responsibility to work with the staff liaison to prepare agendas. So before the next meeting, you know, staff will reach out to the chair, Ben in this case right now, and you know, the agenda will be prepared in consultation with the chair. And then the vice chairperson just operates as the chair in the absence of the chair. So just presiding over the meeting when the chair is not there. Section 5.10 talks about quorums. A quorum of the advisory board is a quorum of the appointed members, not a quorum of the seats. So in the case of the Parks Commission, you have 7 seats, but if at any time you only have 5 people appointed, 3 people would still, in that case, form a quorum. So we do run into instances where we have several vacancies, and we don't require that you have a full quorum of all the seats in order to conduct your business, because that would be pretty restrictive at times. Conflicts of interest. If any of you have a conflict of interest where you might benefit financially from something that's coming before the Parks Commission, you need to disclose that and then disqualify yourself from the discussion. I don't anticipate that's going to come up in the Parks Commission very often. 5.12, this is a new one that's probably going to change or be a little bit different than what you're used to. Liaisons and representatives. So the mayor's responsibility is to designate a staff person to function as the primary support person for each advisory board. The staff person will be the liaison between the board and the city council. So the liaison in this case is taking on the responsibility of making sure that everything that the Parks Commission is doing is being conveyed and relayed to the city council, to other staff, to other commissions. So this is why you've probably noticed that Councilmember Likens isn't a liaison anymore. Council, and we don't also have the liaisons between the Arts Commission and Parks Commission that we had before. The reason for this is that council is really stressing a kind of a one-way or a one avenue of communication. So everything needs to go through the liaison to do this. And that's, oh, go ahead, Ben.
Can you talk a little bit more about the communication for that? What that might look like?
Yeah, so like in between your meetings, if you have something that comes up that you need to, bring to the city's attention, or you need to get on the Parks Commission attention, it should go through the liaison. So rather than like sending an email out to all of the Parks Commission, you would send an email to the liaison. Rather than reaching out to council directly, if you have something that you think council needs to know about, it should go through the liaison. If it's something that needs to go like to the Arts Commission, if you're collaborating on something, that would be the staff person's responsibility to make sure that's getting done.
Josh, is there a confirmation that that communication is actually getting to those other council members, or not council members, but commission members?
Yeah, typically what will happen is the staff person should send like an email to all of the commission if it's something that the commission needs to know about. And then that would be, I'm guessing that you guys have had the OPMA training where you know not to reply all and create group emails and that type of thing. So that is why it's helpful to use the liaison, because the liaison has the ability to email you as a body and say, hey, this is coming up. We're going to talk about this at the next meeting. Don't reply all. If you have any questions, let me know. And that avoids a lot of potential pitfalls that could happen. Like, say, if your chair, if Ben was to send out an email to the entire body and say, hey, let's talk about this at the next meeting, that can lead to OPMA violations a lot quicker than if you're communicating through staff. So that's just an example there. And then council really wants communication to be coming through staff from the advisory boards and not directly from the advisory boards. And we talk about this a little bit later in these rules too, but that's the same going the other direction. So council members should not individually be reaching out to you as commissioners to talk about commission business either. It's important that those conversations stay in the public meetings so that, if a council member has something they want to talk about and they have something that's on their mind or something that's on their agenda, that's discussed openly in a public meeting rather than behind the scenes in communications between commissioners. So that is the function of that staff. And the other part of that is that the mayor is asking my office, the city clerk's office, so that's me and my assistant city clerk, Tiffany Element, who's just come on in the last couple of months. We're going to be functioning as the liaison for the Parks Commission. Probably starting with your next meeting, I'll be working with Ben and Matt and other staff to do the agenda and that type of thing. And the clerk's office is also taking on that role for the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. We're already doing it for the Arts Commission, leading the Salary Commission and the Civil Service Commission as well. So we're just kind of stressing getting all of the commissions on the same page communications wise. So that's a change that you'll see. Not to detract from what Terry's been doing with you for years now, but we're gonna try to get that all under one umbrella and have that communication be kind of consistent. So that's a change we'll be seeing in the future here.
It can feel very, quite honestly, from personal experience, it can feel very much like you are lost in space as a person who's trying to communicate with other people on your commission or trying to just understand something better. It's really hard when you can't communicate with other people on your own commission to even clarify something. So I think that, to me, there's good and bad with all of this, because it feels like there's some breakdown in communication sometimes if you can't talk to anyone. So what's the point of being on the commission? So that's the point that I think is we have to find a way to work within that.
Yeah. And what I will say to that is that if you have that feeling and that is something that you're dealing with, reach out to me and let me know that and let me address that and make sure that I'm communicating to the level that you need to have that communication be done. We really do take seriously the potential for serial meetings and meetings happening outside of your official regular meetings. So that is something that we are on the lookout for, and we don't want to run into the situation where we have multiple commissioners having the same conversation and creating a serial meeting that's not accessible to the public. So there are ways around that, and there are plenty of ways that we can communicate to each other, but we just really need to be careful around that serial meeting. Will.
Yeah, thanks, Joshua. Just real quick clarification. So if I understood you correctly, the clerk's division or office is going to be the liaison for this commission, then what does that make Matt? I thought Matt was essentially the liaison, and if we had questions or wanted to set up meetings or additional discussions, that everything would go through him. Is that not the case?
So as far as like official Parks Commission business and meetings, that should go through me. But if you have questions or ideas or things that, you know, projects that Matt's working on that he's looking for your input on specifically, like individually, absolutely that will go through Matt. One of the issues the Parks Commission will run into, and we're going to probably get into this more as we go through the work plan and get into stuff this year and next year, is that it's not just Matt's Parks Department that the Parks Commission is supporting. The planning department's going to be working with you going forward as they get into the urban tree plan that they're working on. They're probably going to be working with the Parks Commission as they get into the climate action stuff that they're doing with the comp plan. And then the Public Works and Engineering section is also going to be working with the Parks Commission, like you've been working with Jeff for quite a while. So his division also is going to have stuff that comes to you. So my role as the liaison is going to be just to coordinate all of those different departments and the projects that they have that they're going to be bringing to you. I anticipate that Matt's probably going to be have the lion's share of the stuff that's coming to you, and he'll probably be involved in all of these meetings, and he'll have updates for you at most of these meetings. But as far as coordinating the official stuff that's happening in the Parks Commission, that will go through me, and I'll make sure that, you know, everyone is everything's being addressed and everything's getting on the agenda and being in a position where you guys can discuss and take action on it.
So just pointed to clarify, and if we have specific questions pertaining to Parks Commission's related issues, they go to you and then to Matt, not directly to Matt?
That if it's specifically related to Parks Commission, like meeting structure or agendas or what's happening, you know, that type of thing, that should come to me. If it's like if you've got questions about the Crescent Creek master plan that you want to talk to Matt about, then go ahead and reach out to Matt about that. But if it's going to be like something that's officially brought before the Parks Commission to discuss, then it needs to be brought to my attention too.
The last question, then I'm gonna let everyone else go, because this new configuration doesn't make much sense to me. Is this the first time the city has tried this approach? I've never seen where there's been essentially two liaisons for one commission or committee. I run the TMPW committee for Public Works and CTAC, and so I'm familiar with how it works. But this just seems like if you and Matt or you or whomever isn't talking, it seems like there's a lot of room for confusion and mistakes given the way we're trying to structure, the city is structuring things now. So I don't know if there's a question there or more of a comment, but.
Well, our hope is that it's the opposite of that. There are a number of director level positions that are going to be working with the Parks Commission, and we're hoping that we can, that won't be the issue, because I'm in communication with these people on a daily basis, that we can make sure that everyone is getting their needs met with the Parks Commission. So I'm hoping that won't be the case. We will see as we go through. If that turns out to be the case, we'll definitely be adapting to that. But that is the opposite of the intent here. So I'm hopeful that that's where we're headed. And just for background, the clerk's office has staffed most of these committees in the past. It's fluctuated back and forth. The Arts Commission, for example, has flip-flopped between Public Works and Parks and City Clerk's office many times. Lodging Tax Advisory Committee is the same thing. The model that other cities use is that the clerk is the liaison for virtually every committee, because every committee is an open public meeting body, and the clerk is responsible for the record of all those meetings and the organization of all those meetings. That's a model that a lot of other cities have used that we're kind of gravitating towards. But this is a new process, and it's a new setup. I'm hopeful that it will be successful, but you know, if it's not, we will adjust and do what we need to make it successful. So, Georgina.
Yes, a couple of questions. It just feels very regimented, to be quite honest. And, you know, we're a group of people who actually have never physically met. I think I met Ben once or twice. And under this, I guess I wouldn't meet Ben at all. I believe that personal relationships go a long way to helping you do a better job, helping you to know each other's opinions. We aren't all going to have the same opinions, but usually decisions are better when you can share those opinions. Like Stephanie and I know, talked a little bit about Clarence Shaw. You know, nobody knows that Clarence Shaw is, that he's the namesake of our local park here, and that maybe we should have some type of information board or something about him. He was quite a character. And so under this, it sounds like Stephanie and I shouldn't talk or see each other. It should go through somebody else. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, I know in Lacey, they have guidelines for their commissions, and it accepts the fact that you might have your own opinion about the business of your commission, and that your own opinion may not agree with the business that is being undertaken by that particular commission. And that if you want to speak about that, you just have to say, well, I'm not speaking now as a commissioner, you know, if you were out in public, for instance, because I don't think you're supposed to even talk about the parks business to the public. So, you know, if you have to defer on everything, I agree with Will. It's like, well, then why are we on a commission? You know, opinions are very important to everybody. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. When we're discussing Parks Commission business, I think the proper place to have those opinions is in these meetings when we discuss the things that come up. So I understand that, you know, there are going to be things that commissioners talk about, you know, one-on-one, and that's going to be fine to a certain extent. But I mean, I've seen it time and again with almost every committee that we've worked with, that as soon as you've got one person talking to one person, and then they bring in a third person, and then that third person reaches out to a fourth person, we've technically committed a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. And that's what we really need people to be cautious of. So I think if there's two of you that are working on something that you want to bring to the commission to discuss, I think that's fine, but you need to be really cautious about how far that goes. So that's my warning, and that's my hesitation.
Well, there is a big difference between 2 and 4. I think
yes, there is.
Everyone's aware of the quorum, you know.
Beth.
Yeah, Josh, you had mentioned that the other boards and commissions are going to be, the city clerk's going to be the liaison for those as well, including the planning commission and the design review board.
Planning commission, those two boards, planning commission and design review board, those are administrative boards that work for the community development director. So for now, those are going to be staffed by that. So the planning commission, or the design review board in particular, almost everything they do is a recommendation directly to the community development director for the planning decisions that they make. And the planning commission also has a lot of that in the work plans that they are undertaking. So those two will be staffed by the community development director for now. So we will see how that works. If that model doesn't work as well and we need to bring them into the city clerk's office, that option's there. But for now, we're going to leave those because they have an administrative obligation to the director under the municipal code. They're going to stay with that department.
See, that makes sense to me. Like, yeah. They have, you know, they report to the community development director. Like, I'm all for efficiencies in government. Trust me, I'm all for that. But you know, having a parks manager makes, you know, the LTAC, you know, board and the arts commission, they don't have an arts manager, so that wouldn't make sense. It does make sense for the city clerk's office to handle those, but for us to have, you know, a parks manager and then not to have them be our liaison, that's a question mark in my head. Why?
Well, I can, just speaking to the parks manager position, and Matt can elaborate on this too, because I mean, that's his position, but the parks manager position here is maybe a little bit different than in other cities where it's not a director of a department. Eventually, the budgeted plan is for Matt to have an administrative assistant to help with the parks management. But there's a delineation in duties between the parks management, manager, which is kind of a planning position, and then the operations side of parks, which is under public works. That may or may not be the most efficient system for managing parks, and certainly a lot of cities have much different systems and ways that that's set up. That's what we're currently operating under those. So just from that perspective, because we have so many different kind of fingers in the parks pie here, that's kind of why we're trying to centralize this committee right now under the clerk's office, so we can make sure that we're coordinating properly with all departments that you guys will be interfacing with. So
Got it.
yeah, we are definitely going into this as a trial period, and if there are restrictions, limitations that we can't overcome using this, we're going to be looking at that. And if the mayor needs to find a different solution for having a liaison for this committee, then we will definitely do that. But this is the path forward for now, and hopefully it will work the way that we hope it will work. And if not, we will definitely make sure that it does. So
Sounds good.
Yeah. Any other questions about liaisons before we move on?
Yeah, I'd like to touch on it again. Sorry.
Yep. Absolutely.
Was this, so does that mean that Matthew's job scope is changing?
Well, that I can't speak to because I'm not really sure what his scope is exactly. That would be something for the mayor and city administrator to address. I mean, staffing the Parks Commission has been part of his job. I don't really anticipate that his role in the Parks Commission is going to change that much. He's still going to be the one that's presenting items and projects and whatever he's working on to you. He'll still be a point of contact to you in some situations where he's the one that's the appropriate staff person to talk to. So I don't really know that it will change that much. He will still be very involved in this commission. So
Okay.
does that kind of answer?
Yeah. I mean, we were all very excited for the hiring of Matthew, and then to hear that he's gonna, be withdrawn from interaction with us is a bit of a frustration.
Well, I hope that that's not the case. I don't think that will be the case. So
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for answering those. I appreciate that.
All right, so just moving along down the list here, we've got section 513. It's just the procedures, records, and minutes. This should be pretty normal. Robert's Rules of Order is the guiding framework for your meetings. One thing that I like to stress is that advisory boards should not allow strict adherence to Robert's Rules of Order to impede the board in conducting its business. So we use Robert's Rules of Order, but if we get into a situation where we don't really know how to use Robert's Rules of Order to get to the point we want to get to, then we will do what we need to get to the point we want to get to. So if we have motions and amendments and nobody's quite sure what the order of things is, let's just focus on getting to the point that the committee wants to get to. And the city council operates the same way, more or less. If they go off book from Robert's Rules of Order, we just follow the lead of the council and let the discussion take us where it needs to go. Minutes will be action minutes. That shouldn't be anything new for you. The city clerk is responsible for all of those records. That shouldn't be anything new either. Each advisory board has regular meetings, just like you do. So you have your first Wednesday of the month. That's not going to change. Special meetings, you can request special meetings to deal with matters whenever you need to. This is again where that consent of the mayor comes in. That's just saying, if we're going to have a special meeting, let's just make sure that we have the staff capacity to do it first. And the same thing applies to subcommittees. So I know sometimes I think the Parks Commission has used subcommittees to deal with matters. Subcommittees are subject to OPMA just the same as the regular committee. So anytime that we form one of those, we need to make sure that we're following all the same rules as the regular Parks Commission. And again, those will be subject to the mayor to make sure that we have the appropriate staff to handle those. So 516 is communications with the city council. We talked about this a little bit, but it's not appropriate for advisory board members to go to council and talk about your advisory board business with council. So you shouldn't be approaching council members with proposals or ideas, and vice versa. Council should not be coming to you with their thoughts or direction on the things that are before the Parks Commission. Anything that's coming out of the Parks Commission needs to be a Parks Commission recommendation as a body. So you should, if you have ideas, you should discuss them in the Parks Commission. You should formulate your recommendation as a commission, and that should be what goes to council. And if council has directed you to work on something, individual council members should not be approaching you and saying, you know, we've sent this to you to discuss. This is how I think you guys should do it. This is what I want to see happen. Council members know that they're not supposed to do that, and that shouldn't be occurring. So that is what that section is intended to apply. Section 517, communications with the public. This is one we're probably going to revisit because it's really poorly worded. It's not meant to say that as Parks Commissioners, you should never talk to the public. What it's, I think, intended to say is that you should not go out and represent yourselves as Parks Commissioners out in the public in a way that's not appropriate. So we've had issues with other commissioners and other commissions going out in the public and saying, hey, I'm a commissioner, this is what we're doing. And then basically putting themselves in a position of authority in the public, or working with other committees or working with other jurisdictions. That's not appropriate. So we've had issues with other commissioners going to other cities and saying, you know, this is what the city of Gig Harbor is doing. It's not appropriate. Can you go out and tell the city of Gig Harbor to stop doing it? That kind of thing is what we don't want to see happening. So this is not to say that you shouldn't, you know, talk to your friends and neighbors about what's happening on the Parks Commission and let them know what's happening and get their thoughts. That's absolutely appropriate. It's just, don't try to represent yourself in a position of authority that hasn't been given to you, unless the board or your staff liaison has said, go out and, you know, tell people that this is what's happening. That shouldn't be what you do. 518, we've also talked about a little bit. Oh, I see Louise has her hand up.
Yeah, you know, that it would benefit from adding, that paragraph would benefit from adding that word then. So, you know, members should not represent themselves as advisory board members in position of authority in the city.
Yeah.
Would make that a lot clearer, because it does read like we shouldn't tell people that we're.
Yeah, I think we will clean that up in the next update that we do with council, just to make that a little more clear.
Yeah, thank you.
518, this is where we talk more about the serial meetings issue that I think we've already probably talked about enough. Just make sure that if you're not violating that serial meeting clause in OPMA, make sure you're not over communicating with, you know, more than a quorum of the Parks Commission at any time. To be safe, the easiest thing to do is just let the liaison know, this is, you know, I think we should talk about this at the next Parks Commission meeting, or I think this should be part of our discussion, and let staff get that out there so we can do it in an appropriate way that kind of keeps us out of trouble. Lobbying efforts, this just kind of speaks back to that 517 about communications with the public. Don't go out and talk to the state legislature as a member of the Parks Commission to try to influence legislation or make your viewpoint known unless it's been expressly directed to you to do that. So that's referring to lobbying efforts towards the state legislature on what they're doing. Ben?
How does that pertain to like grant applications?
Grant applications. to be involved in those, you probably should be coordinating with staff. So like if, say Matthew's working on a grant application for something and he wants or needs input from the Parks Commission, that should be a formal direction or a formal request from staff to do that. So in that instance, it's fine. I don't think it would be, I think it would be harmless to reach out, like if a grant application, like what Pierce County is selecting for public input. But the intent of this is that again, you're not representing yourself in an official capacity on behalf of the Parks Commission without the approval of the Parks Commission to do that. So,
Okay.
I think
So there's the approval of the Parks Commission.
yeah. So like if we're doing a grant with Pierce County for like a land acquisition for their conservation proposals that we've been doing. And in that case, I think it would be appropriate for the Parks Commission to say that, you know, you officially take a stance of supporting that application. And then in that case, then individual commissioners could be empowered to go if there's a hearing for that and say, you know, the Parks Commission has supported this. So in that case, then you could have the authorization to do that. But I just make sure that it's pretty clear that the Parks Commission supports that. Well.
So that would be the commission taking action
Yeah.
without council approval. So I mean, would you have to know, I mean, is it a foregone conclusion that council has already authorized applying for the grant and then the commission?
Yeah, we can't apply for
it.
Yeah, we can't apply for a grant unless council approves it. So if council has not approved us to apply for a grant, there won't be anything for you to testify on. So is that okay? Is that kind of what you're asking?
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
That, I mean, the commission can't take action even if the commission wants to, if it's not supported by council.
Right, correct, yes. And
okay.
it won't even be an issue unless it is supported by council, because as staff, we can't go out and seek a grant unless our council specifically authorizes us to do that. Yeah, and then the last section is just basically saying that if there's any kind of travel expense or training expense that that you incur as a member, that needs to be just approved in advance. And that takes us through that chapter. So yeah, I guess there are a few things in there that are maybe a little bit different for you. I'm hopeful that, you know, that it won't impede the business of the Parks Commission and that you will be able to accomplish what it is that you're hoping to accomplish. And I'm happy to work with you and answer any questions that you have as they come up. So yeah, well.
So just to, I guess, further clarification. So the way this communication flow would go then is the various directors will coordinate their needs from the commission through you. You will communicate that with the chair, and that is how you will go about setting the agendas.
Yep.
Is that effectively it? And then the reverse flow of that is through you back to the directors and managers.
Yeah, that is pretty much how it's going to work. Yeah, so I would be the one responsible for setting the agenda. Typically the way it works, and this is what I do with the city council and all the directors. So it's kind of normal business for the clerk's office, but I'll put out a notice of the agenda that I have, what I know I have for agenda items that are going to be on the next meeting. And then I'll reach out to Ben, I'll reach out to Matthew and Jeff in Public Works and in community development and see what they have, what they need to have added to the agenda. And that's the process we'll undergo.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Well, thank you. Any other questions for Josh on any of this? Yeah, definitely a few changes in there. So thank you for running through that with us. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and I guess I understand that this is new and maybe a change for you. So yeah, I mean, if you have concerns or things don't seem like they're working effectively, just let me know, because this is this is a different process. So, I mean, we can make it work how it needs to work to make sure we're getting things accomplished. That's the goal here, and that's what council is trying to point everything towards. Just making sure that.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I think it's important to somehow convey to council that is there the challenge with this kind of communication, while I know it's trying to be very process oriented, is to wind up with no one that wants to serve on a commission because they don't feel like they have a voice, or it's very hard to get your voice heard. I realize that these meetings are the venue for that. And no one should be really, working all the back channels. And I get that that's a thing that we don't want to have happen. But, I think it is challenging sometimes to try to be a community volunteer and spend your time doing this, but then feel like, well, are we really only here to provide input on ideas that staff and council are putting forward? If that's the role, then we need to state that very clearly. If the role is that we are supposed to bring things of interest to the staff and council, then that's a little bit different. So I think I've been in situations on city committees where I'm very, in no uncertain terms, told that the advisory committee is an advisory committee and has no power of true input or to shape anything that's happening. So that's just something that I think is important for us to voice and to make it clear that we want to be here to be helpful to the city and to Matthew, and to try to do something that means something. So that said, I think
Yeah.
the drill. You're really well versed in all this stuff, so I'm not gonna question that. But
I see that Will has a question too, but I just want to talk about what Stephanie said, and I'm going to share my screen here because I think we do need to look into the municipal code for the Parks Commission and what your mandate is. And the Parks Commission is unique, I think. Well, not unique, but you have, and we're looking at section 2.50 of the municipal code, and it's option C here. And this is your mandate. The commission may recommend to the city council regarding planning, promotion, acquisition, construction, and development of public recreation facilities and recreational programs. So this is not council telling you, hey, we want advice on this. This is you as a commission saying, hey, we see this issue, we want to address it and bringing it to council's attention. So you absolutely have that ability. It needs to be done in your meetings. It needs to be done formally, and it needs to be, ideally get these things on your work plan so council knows that they're coming. So you're not going off and studying something that council doesn't want you to study. But you totally have the ability to bring on your own initiatives on parks related issues to bring before council. And really that goes towards administrative things too with staff. I mean, section F on here is to recommend rules and regulations and related to the use of parks and facilities. So as staff, operations staff like Jeff and the Public Works Department, they should be expecting you to come up with ideas for park usage and rules and things like that. So you have the ability to do that, and I don't want any of this to take away from that. So hopefully, I hope that didn't come across in the message that I was sending earlier, but that's totally part of your mandate. So
okay. Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up on the screen. That's really helpful.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, sorry for all the questions, but this just got a lot of curiosity in this process. So if, one of the things the commission would do is obviously we would recommend for surveying the public or gathering information about our park system, and then providing that information to whom? Like, the way I see this is, one of the benefits, quite frankly, not that you aren't a great guy, Joshua, and the city's clerk office isn't going to do a bang up job, is that when you have a director or manager of a department as the liaison, there's a little more, and maybe this is what's trying to be avoided, is you're able to strategize a little bit more, and you can get direct feedback. It's that direct interaction. I'm not communicating to you in a slap shot way what my idea is, and then you're trying to convey that to Matt or to Jeff, and you kind of miss the mark, or I miss the mark. We don't really have the discussion because they're like, yeah, no, that's not a topic I want to take up with the commission, or that the commission needs to explore. And so maybe this ties back around into finally getting together and have face-to-face meetings. But that to me would be the big hurdle, potential roadblock in this process. And so maybe if you're able to navigate that with us so that we're able to effectively, we just don't feel isolated, like we're waiting for someone to ask. And then we have an idea and we can't really figure out how to inject that idea to see if it's going to float, right? That would be my concern.
Yeah. So the idea is like the way that process is going to work, the way that I kind of envision that working. So if you have an idea for like a regulation or a way to operate a park, so like the Ansich boat storage, if you have an idea that maybe we should limit the number of oversized kayaks that we store there, or some kind of, policy like that, you can bring that to me as the liaison and say, hey, we should have the Parks Commission discuss that. I can take that to Jeff and say, hey, this has been proposed. And then Jeff has the option to say, well, let's just do it. Or Jeff can say, yes, let's get the Parks Commission to discuss that. But anything that comes of a recommendation like that needs to be a Parks Commission recommendation. So there needs to be a meeting of the body. There needs to be consensus of the body that this is what you are recommending. So that's going to happen in a meeting. That's going to happen face to face with the staff person that's going to be making that decision or that determination or taking that advice. So the conversations are going to happen. And if it's a Parks Commission conversation, it's going to happen in a Parks Commission meeting. And I really am hoping that this will not deter that. I hope that addresses your question, but I don't foresee this being a situation where you're going to have ideas and things you want to do and they just come to the city clerk's office and die and nobody wants to address them. That should not be the way that this functions. And a lot of these things that are, if you have specific ideas, it's going to be appropriate for you to reach out to Matt. Like if Matt's working on the master plan for Crescent Creek Park and you have an idea that you want to see in there, you can reach out to Matt with your idea and Matt can say, yeah, that's a good idea, I'm going to do that. Or Matt can say, yeah, let's take this to the Parks Commission and get their feedback and see if they have advice on what they want me to do related to that. So those conversations are going to happen, I think. And if they're not happening, then absolutely let me know. And I will do what I can to make sure they do. Georgina?
Yeah, so these are then conversations that take place outside of the meeting then. So there are going to be lots of conversations that, I might say something to you, then you have to go talk to somebody else, or I don't know.
Yes, they will. On a staff level, they'll be happening outside of the meeting. So if you talk to me about something, I'll talk to staff and we'll come up with a determination on, how to best proceed with that. If it's going to be something that rises to the level of the commission or not. So that, yeah, those conversations will happen outside of the meeting unless it involves the whole Parks Commission. And then once we get to the point where we're involving the whole Parks Commission, then it will be in the meeting, if that makes sense.
So Matthew will be at the meetings or not?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So what happens with Terry?
What's that?
I said, what happens with Terry's role?
Terry is, her job has, I won't speak for her, but I think her job duties have changed quite a bit over the last couple of years, fluctuating between filling gaps in the Public Works Department. So the staffing position here, what I'm doing taking over for Terry, her plate has been filled up with a lot of other things already that have kind of made the Parks Commission an extra burden on her. I won't say burden, that's bad. You guys are not a burden, but her plate is very full. And I think that she has a lot of other things that are more in line with her job duties, but I don't want to speak for that because I'm not Terry's supervisor and I don't assign Terry's work plan, but
Terry? Terry, you've given us a lot of great years. The Parks Commission, you've been here when I first got here, and Matthew even said you were here when he was here last stint. So
Yeah,
Terry,
I've supported the Parks Commission for 16 years now, so seen a lot of
Yes.
different members, and we've worked on a lot of fun projects, but it's a good commission. It's a fun commission, and there's a lot of good work to do, so I appreciate your kind words.
I truly appreciate every meeting you've sat in, every email you've written, every, coordinated. You've done so much for this commission, and that can't be understated. And it's gonna be a big hole to fill.
Thank you. I think Josh's office is going to be really busy, so.
Sounds like it. Josh, happy to have you guys step in that role. Gonna miss Terry.
I've got big shoes to fill, I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry. Okay. Will, you got one more? All right. Josh, thank you so much. Appreciate all your information on that and answering the questions. I know it kind of seemed like a firing line, but this means a lot to us, and we just want to make sure that, hey, our work is meaningful and effective. And so
yeah, well, I definitely want to hear from you as we go along, if there's any concerns, issues, I don't want you to not reach out to me if there's anything that you feel isn't working. So
yeah, sounds good. Anybody else have any comments, input on the matter? No. All right, everything was kind of handled. All right, where do we move on from that? Josh, you got anything else for us?
I don't believe so. No. Nope.
Okay, so we'll look forward to the OPMA training next meeting, July. Just as, once upon a time, you used to have July meetings off. Terry might remember. But I think we've kind of gone away from that with the realization that there's only 12 meetings a year. Where does that fall? Looks like we'll be all right with the 4th of July and stuff like that. Okay, so we'll look forward to the OPMA training at our next meeting then, assuming that they get the video up to date.
Assuming that the video is up to date, and that's just a video to watch, and I won't have any additional comments on that. So if you have any problems with that, you'll have to take it up with the Secretary of State.
Okay. I don't know. Yeah, maybe it is most effective that we watch it during our meeting, but like you said, our meetings are only 2 hours long. If that's something that can be emailed and watched, that would also be appreciated.
That may be an option. I'll look into that.
Okay. Okay, so moving on to new business item number 2, the Parks Commission discussion regarding stakeholders for the park planning process. I think this has to do with Crescent Creek Park and maybe the formulation of a master plan going forward in that park, and kind of how we're going to incorporate the community and get their input involved in the whole process. And I'm thinking and how we recognize who we want to be a part of those discussions, and how we get a hold of those people. And Matthew, maybe you're a little more familiar with that process, the formalities of it, and how to reach out to the community and formulate these stakeholder groups. Maybe you can provide some input on that, and particularly what we're looking for in that.
Yeah, pleasure to. Good evening, all. The discussion about stakeholders for park planning is kind of couched in a generic way on the agenda. I would have intended to ask you commissioners to do some work identifying what stakeholders and feel are important for staff to contact for Crescent Creek. So absolutely that. I wanted to go down the path, and this is really a commission decision, of having you do your own exercise that we really ask the community to do whenever they start a public process. What are my interest groups? What am I part of? What do I represent? And in some ways, it's an examination of interest and even bias. We didn't really talk specifically conflict of interest tonight beyond financial, but in an open public process, it's really important for people to identify who they are and where they come from. And as you commissioners might be willing to do tonight, that also helped, I thought, you get ready for the election of officers on your agenda. So I sort of looked at this item as a two process way. One, an exercise among park commissioners to go about identifying interest and background. And then just to help talk about which ones are critical for parks planning. And we could get so far as to talking about Crescent Creek Park Master Planning, but we'd be just a little bit ahead of schedule. Our consultant would probably like to really help you through a process called a situational assessment. And they like to do it consistently and ask the same questions to the same people. And they will ask the parks commissioners those kinds of questions, like, tell me why you're interested in Crescent Creek. And they aren't fishing for bias as much as they're just trying to establish what all the known interests are in a public way. What I'm getting at is this item is up to you. You can talk tonight directly about Crescent Creek. You could introduce yourselves as stakeholders and think about what groups you're with and disclose that to the group. Just out of, you think everyone should know. No one has to identify anything you don't want to. You don't have to say what religious association you belong to. I don't mean that. But if you think it's relevant to your job and relevant to parks planning, and in this case, it's parks commissioners, it would be good to put it out there, getting to know each other. I think it's a good exercise to go through. You can also just say, knowing Crescent Creek, I know these interests, and I really think staff needs to start thinking about this group and that group, because you are part of, you know, the community better than I do. And I would really value hearing your identification of stakeholders.
Sorry, I was on mute. So what you're asking for, I kind of missed it. So just kind of relay kind of where we're vested in the community. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
I think that would be great. It'd be great to hear different interest groups and have that will broaden all of our minds in getting ready for forming of an advisory committee. The consultant, HBB, is proposing that there be an advisory group for Crescent Creek Master Planning. And they're going to say, what are all the known stakeholders in your community? And then we're going to start looking for people who can represent stakeholders and make sure that the advisory group is a well-vetted group. It's not just the movers and shakers of the community. Really, that's not of our interest. The movers and shakers, decision makers, are our city council advised by park commissioners, right? What this is how do we represent all the different interest groups that are related to park planning, maybe in general, if you go through this exercise, and then we go through it for Crescent Creek. And people will say, well, the volleyball community is important. The neighbors are important, and people associated with historic societies of Crescent Creek School, which is now the Masonic Lodge. They'll go through a process of listing out what we need to be sure gets brought into the advisory committee. So what I'm asking you to do is either give me direct input tonight on stakeholders involved around Crescent Creek so I can begin an outreach to them and start accounting for all stakeholders, or do it on your own, because you might find it helps everybody think about, oh, this affiliation, I'm in this club, I play racquetball with a group of people, whatever it might be. These things then help maybe you get to know each other, and they also help us all think about stakeholders that are important to parks.
Gotcha. Well.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I was just going to offer a few suggestions, but I don't know whether we want to do this now or provide them in writing, or how would you like to do this, Chair?
So we still got a half an hour plus. I wouldn't mind dipping into this topic a little bit if you want to go ahead and offer what you got.
So I guess I'll disclose that my mother has 8 acres on Crescent Creek upstream outside of the city limits. And I have strong opinion that I think we should involve, if possible, stakeholders that are outside the city and that are within that watershed. You might not include the entire watershed. It is one of the largest natural intact watersheds in Pierce County that is Crescent Creek. So I think that's really important. I think the Crescent Creek Alliance should probably be involved, and maybe that's how you kind of pull in a lot of the property owners that are upstream. And I view that through the lens of just the whole kind of more environmental side of the equation, getting them vested in the park, people in the park understanding, you know, kind of what's going on upstream and the connections that can be made there. That's just what comes immediately to mind.
Yeah, great. Stephanie, you got your hand up as well.
Yes, I do. Spent a lot of time in that park as a kid. If I can share my screen, I just pulled up a picture because I found it the other day and I thought this could be really interesting for the Parks Commission, just to take a look at this picture.
All right.
This is the stumps on the left-hand side of the picture is Crescent Creek Park. And this is the original bridge that went over the creek there. And you can see how it was completely logged out. The school hasn't yet been built yet, but the Masonic Lodge or Crescent Valley School was built right here. And then we've been doing research on this farm over here. It was the Illa farm and then Jacobson and whatnot. But I just thought this was such an amazing view because we actually have this view in multiple decades across time, all the way up to about 1980, of this exact view of this road going up. And it's pretty remarkable that this whole area here was once a large forest and then was logged out. It became the park shortly after this picture, actually. So
Is this looking west, Stephanie? This is looking west?
this is looking
Or
towards
east?
Crescent Valley
East.
Drive. East,
Looking
yeah.
east.
Mhm.
It's looking east. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, up here is Crescent Valley Drive, and down here would be what becomes Randall Drive. And obviously that's the bridge. But yeah, if you go down this way, it looks so different because there's no trees there or anything. But up here is where the sand volleyball courts are, you know, the baseball fields here, and then all the WPA buildings and stuff are down along the creek down at this end. So yeah, it was just a glimmer in the eye when they first put this together. So anyway, that's interesting. And I've got other pictures that show the same site after they built the school, which became Masonic Lodge, when it was 2 stories and all that stuff. So, you know, we can actually put together a whole decade by decade series of photographs, almost of that exact view, to show the change over time with the site.
I do
But
think
I
that's helpful because lots of people say, I don't want any change. You know,
Yeah.
it is the way it is, and it is how it has always been.
Yeah.
No, it hasn't. And
Not
so
really. Yeah.
and then of course before that it was the Women's Village. So
Right. And actually, Louise, I really would love to have the tribe involved in terms of telling us exactly how they know that, because that's a piece of knowledge that has come out in this process that I can't find any sources for unless it's just tribal knowledge. And if it's just tribal knowledge, that's great. But somehow we need to understand that a little bit better, because I don't want to perpetuate something that I can't really tell someone where the source comes from. So that would be really valuable information to have. And I've asked the tribe also for that information, and hopefully that will come forward. So, but I think the tribe is important. I think obviously the people that have lived around there for a long time, whether they live on Crescent Creek or their kids played sports there. I mean, I know I grew up playing ball in the field there on PAA sports, and then the new, what we call the newcomers, the volleyball folks, also have a stake in there. There used to be the bike track that people used to ride on, but I don't know that that's being used very much anymore. So, and then there's, you know, the other group of folks that really want to see the Masonic Hall, or AKA Crescent Valley School, preserved a little truer to its original form. Whether that's going to be possible or not is anyone's guess. But yeah.
And was that a Elks Lodge or what was that?
Masonic?
Masonic?
Yeah.
I mean, do they have, I mean, any interest in providing, I mean, do they want to be a part of this process?
I don't know. I was told that they pretty much just picked up and left. And a guy came in and donated a Bible that was left there. And he has a few other items from the Masonic Lodge when they were there. But there's not much that I know of that's left there. I haven't
So-
been in there, and maybe someday we can have a tour of that building, because I haven't been inside it since I was like 18. And that was a while ago, so.
So for the Masonic Lodge, it went from the Masons, is it the Masons?
Mhm.
And then to the school? Was there something in between?
Isn't it the other way? It went from being a school to being the Masonic Lodge?
To
Well,
now
yeah,
the preschool.
it was originally a school, and then it became the Masonic Lodge, and then the preschool leased it. But I think the city bought it straight from the Masonic group. Is that correct? Yeah. Matthew's
Gotcha.
nodding his head.
Yeah, it is.
Should we get, would Public Works be potential stakeholder, just in the sense that we're looking, I mean, in the event that the ultimate plan involves kind of a culvert removal, bridge in that area, that the park, however that park kind of evolves, that it plans for that potentially?
Yeah, Will, thanks for bringing them up. They would be integral to our process, not a typical stakeholder, but more on the reviewing of scope, reviewing of implementation recommendations, looking at context of how infrastructure relates. They would be brought in at any even programmatic level, much less at schematic programs. I would insist on them being on a design, internal staff and design review as anything materializes. So yes, thanks for bringing it up. And I think it's important that you ask that, and that we ensure to you, if ever we need to show it in some public way, that our Public Works is part of the team.
Yes, Stephanie.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I still have my hand out, but I will, something else came to mind. I don't know if we are planning eventually, or if the city's planning to apply for any like Heritage Capital Project Fund grants to do improvements on the Masonic building, but it would certainly would qualify, I would think. But in this year's grant request process, you have to confer with every single tribe that has expressed an interest in your area. And Gig Harbor alone has 8 different tribes that have expressed an interest in knowing about any kinds of park archaeology or historic preservation efforts that are taking place. So that's all dependent on the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation's new interactive map that maps all that out. So, we had to consult with 8 different tribes on the most recent Heritage Capital Project Fund grant. And so I think it's interesting to look at that and invite all of those tribes to be part of that conversation. It's an interesting way to look at it from different perspectives too.
Absolutely. I know when we did the Veterans Memorial Park, we got the school children involved in the planning process for that a little bit. I think they're an important stakeholder, a really important stakeholder, especially for that park where there's so much youthful activity. And how important that was to them, and what that might look like.
About Harbor Watch, did I get that right? That group?
Harbor Wild
would
Watch?
be,
Yeah.
given its location in the estuary type environment there, and yeah.
I don't know how you would get a spokesperson, but throughout your pros document, you talk about seniors. Maybe we can find somebody in the senior world who would like to have some input.
Yeah, well, Les, thanks for bringing that up. And just to help with the group a little bit, when we do stakeholder identifications, I hate to say we classify people, but you can go ahead and say, tell me a little bit about how long you've lived here. Make sure you have newcomers, you have long-termers. Tell me your experience level with this and that. And you can include age, and just be sure that there's a blend. It's not normally by a quota, because that's a frustrating situation, but you want it to be representative of the local demographics. And so you do have to, I feel, a public process, show that you are aware of who your community is and that it's represented well. And so people meet multiple I hate to use the word, but check boxes. Yep, you check 10 boxes. That's wonderful. You really are going to be a strong advisory member, committee member. I suspect the consultant will say no more than 12 people because that becomes unwieldy after that. So you do have to find people with multiple interests and able to speak on from multiple perspectives, typically not as a single representative of a single user group or single interest, because people can't come to an advisory group and find consensus when they're just taking positions based on their interest. Same thing on a Parks Commission. If you come with a singular interest, it needs to be disclosed to the group. Otherwise, it's suspect when you make a group decision.
Gotcha. I mean, this one probably pertains to many parks, but someone familiar with transportation and connectivity. I know that's something that we heard throughout the pros plan is, connecting our parks together. I know it's along the Harbor View walk. I think that's still within, is that still within the Harbor View Trail?
It is. Yeah, that trail goes all the way to Crescent Creek.
Okay.
I wouldn't say the sidewalks are so friendly that direction,
Yeah.
but
Right. It's definitely like at the very, very end of our jurisdiction. So maybe.
but you could make recommendations for connectivity, and that would help prioritize park connections. And that's something a master plan is good at doing too.
Yeah.
I mean, I would recommend someone like architectural historian. I know that, and I don't know if we're going to get to specific names or not, but I can email you a couple people that come to mind, because I've had an architect contact me about the Crescent Valley School to learn more about it and get some photographs. And I hope it's not too annoying, but I did pull up another picture of that particular site so you can see what it looks like after that was built. So this is Dr. Rust standing on the Crescent Creek Bridge. And this building here is actually the Masonic Lodge, aka Crescent Valley School. And you can see that it was actually 2 stories. At some point, which I can't remember exactly the date, but they literally cut the top off and put it next to it. So one of our oral histories tell us. Someone who lived in the valley that we did an oral history with literally told us about how they cut the top of the school off and put it next to it and made it longer. And so it's kind of a fascinating building in terms of all the weird stuff that's happened to it over the years, but it was originally designed by a fairly well-known school architect, and it has this beautiful bell tower and the whole thing that obviously is no longer there. So, but it had, there's a local fellow who's done some drawings that show the building with the original window structures in it. So, it might be interesting to explore that to a degree. But anyway, that's a fun one too.
Stephanie, I like the pictures, and that one of your gifts to this committee is having that historical background, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, ditto, super cool.
Thank you. I know I'm always stumbling across stuff that is like, dang, I had no idea it looked like that. That's so cool.
What about for other stakeholders? What about any groups that typically that throw events in the city and utilize our parks? So what comes to mind is I'm thinking like Turkey Trot, race for a soldier. I know those events pass by the park, and I may be missing other groups that might want to look for opportunities in what the park ultimately becomes, so that it better accommodates those events that they plan around.
So is that like nonprofits, or just NGOs?
Yeah, I'm not aware. Those two that I don't, is it the city that puts on the turkey run? I know Race for a Soldier is run by kind of a group that maybe has an office here in the harbor. I just know those events go by that location. They do them every year. Maybe we just reach out to them in terms of whether they have any interest in being involved and what that interest might be. Just throwing stuff out.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
thanks. I think there is a whole list of people to give notice to, and are you interested, and make sure that they're aware. So that's an awesome part. And I'm not neglecting them or suggesting they weren't stakeholders, but those both are relevant. Are you interested? Would you like to participate? Because we want you to. And then really finding people who are, and I don't need names tonight, but strong representatives of the community interest. And you talking to me about all these different interests then tells me how to ask the volunteers who come forward and say, well, how well do you represent, and are you aware of like events and of tribal interest and so forth? And it's just a way to flesh out that the group that you assemble a very strong stakeholder group.
Well, and no, this is a name when you just said you didn't need names, but someone like Sandra Kern, who currently works for PennMet, but she was the founder of PAA and ran youth sports here for 20 years. She has talked to every parent and every school and arranged with everybody to use every field and every place for everything. She just has so much institutional knowledge of youth sports. I think she or someone like her would be very useful.
Thank you.
And then I'm just going to reiterate that neighbors
Yeah.
is a big one. You know, I know Georgina has that opinion with, you know, the sports complex, you know, like the neighbors need to know, they need to know what's happening. So, you know, I would take the same emphasis on Crescent Creek Park. Hey, the neighbors need to know what's going on in their neighborhood. But that's being such a historic park, you know, and being such, you know, so much history in that park. A lot of people are going to want to know and be a part of that, because there's a lot has happened in that park. So, you know, I don't know if just doing the neighbors, you know, is going to be enough.
Yeah, I think neighbors definitely need to be heard clearly and probably given, if not a role on the advisory committee, special attention.
Yeah.
And I think a sub meeting of neighbors and so forth is appropriate. And so I've been through this process where you don't want to over influence one thing, but you have to give certain focus attention at times.
Yeah.
I liked how Ansich got structured for the core committee, that there were, you know, 2 neighbors and 2 fisher folk and 2 people from the paddle community, and then paddle meaning the team, and then 2 that were community paddlers not affiliated with the team. So that Ansich is a little more, it had more focus from the get-go than, you know, Crescent Creek is sort of wide open right now for what might be done with it. So we don't really, it's not quite the same, but nonetheless, that there were plenty of other people on the committee, but there was always the core representatives of the users of that park that were impacted by the park: neighbors, fishermen, community paddlers, and the team.
Yeah. You know, this park at Crescent Creek specifically referencing has a very large amount of uses to it too. So, I mean, like you said, like keeping that within the confines of a manageable group is, you know, you might be picking and choosing at some points. And so,
Yeah, again, another opportunity for specialized group for input and making sure that they are heard and invited and known that they're recognized as significant users.
Sure. Yeah. Georgina, I see your hand up as well. And then maybe we wrap this up a little bit.
Yeah, and just sort of getting my brain around it a little bit. We talked a while ago about park standards. You know, I'm just trying to get my head around this very, very big project that's going to take place. And I personally, if we had park standards, I think it would just really help. And including, this might sound rather strange, but when I think about maintenance as being such a problem with a park, and that came up in the pros plan, it's come up in the pros plan of 2022 and the pros plan of 2016, that maybe someone from the maintenance in public works should have a role, because we could end up with something in a plan that is going to be very hard to maintain. And I think that they might have some very objective ideas around that to make sure we're going in the same direction or the right direction. And then one thing, in looking at stakeholders and looking at how some projects have gone in the past, and I happened to be reminded of this when I happened to see something from Lacey, actually on guidelines and procedures, that the loudest voices should not always rule the decisions. And I think sometimes I have been personally aware of statements that have been made in the city about, well, we're going to have the voices out there. And those voices sometimes can be very dominating and commanding and intimidating. And, you know, when you get to certain parks, when you're looking at, you don't really have a complete new canvas here, obviously. But when you're looking at ideas for certain areas of that park that you might want to change or amend in some way, then I think we have to be very careful not to always fill our parks up with amenities. You know, we don't have a true downtown park. I don't know if any of you have been to Bellevue's downtown park. That actually originally was owned by the public school system in Bellevue. And it was, I think, a school and, you know, the public, the school district's buildings, administrative buildings, on 17 acres altogether. And it's pretty amazing what they ended up doing. And it's a very flexible park. You know, it's because it has a lot of lawn space. It also has tiered areas that are a little bit like an amphitheater that are grass. And so you can sit on those for entertainment. And they have sort of a retention, it's not a pond, but it's retention water all the way around the outskirts of it with little fountains, and there's lots of wildlife and big trees. And there's a track around the outside, a path around the outside with a lot of people running and walking, jogging, no bikes. But then there's just a ton of flexibility in it. And I think when we get too much into the amenities, we lose the flexibility, which is really what brings a community together in enjoying their park. You know, if we have a community park, if it's all taken up with amenities, you don't have the opportunity to do that. And you know, when I first came to Gig Harbor, and I'm still struggling with it, what is a park to Gig Harbor? You know, I thought I knew what parks were until I came to Gig Harbor, and it's very unique. So you have pocket parks, and then you have amenity parks. You don't really have the idea of the grand, beautiful, flexible space where you can have all sorts of things going on spontaneously, but then those activities can stop, and then you have a gathering space for the community, and you can put on some entertainment, and it's just multi-use, you know. So that's all I have to say. A mouthful, I know.
It's appreciated. Thank you, Georgina.
Welcome.
Well, your opinion's respected and heard. All right. Any last comments on this one? I think we should probably move on if not. Okay. Matthew, that give you kind of a few
Yes.
things? And I mean,
I hope it's the start of the conversation.
okay. So, and if we wanted to email you about that, we would email you or Josh?
Yeah, I think Josh wouldn't have any problem with that coming to me, being a park project assigned to me through city processes. Right.
Okay.
Yep, this is one of those examples where you could reach out directly to the staff person you're working with and let them know your thoughts, and that's
Okay.
perfectly fine.
Okay. So yeah, if anything comes to mind, or Matthew, would you kind of maybe give us what you're looking for next in this process, or I mean, how you see maybe the conversation going further?
Well, I do want the consultant to provide their high level service. They're experts at this, and I don't want to get ahead of them. I will say I met with HBB today, and you're more than welcome to look into their credentials. They were chosen through a competitive process quite some time ago. I've worked with them before, and I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to work with them again. So they are it's a woman-owned company, Juliet Vaughn and Merritt Overt. If you look up Juliet and Merritt, they're both on the website. We have both of them as principals working with us. They're a fantastic team. I would love for them to get a chance to introduce the process to you. They plan to bring to the Parks Commission in the series, I think 3, if not more, maybe it's 4 Park Commission meetings so that you are part of each of the milestones of the master plan. They will likely do their homework in terms of understanding the community before coming to you. So they will probably come before you and say, this is the visioning process that we're anticipating. And we've done our situational assessment, that fancy word. And we were working towards an advisory group. I guess what I'm getting at is they are going to become public and known to you in September. And right now it's preliminary work to identify to get the scope fully done. I'm going to be talking to them as early as tomorrow about being sure that there's some outreach to in a historical way, but also to the tribes, given the input tonight. They will have their contract resolved by the end of this month, their scope of work. And they told me they will start doing some site investigations and meetings in August. I don't know if that answers really what I'm asking of you, Ben. Your community input on what are important aspects of park master planning, and in particular at this site, they're always going to be welcome. I'd like to share with you any conclusions I get to, any kinds of list of stakeholders as identified, just because you would be a great sounding board for that.
I have one quick question. Does the park territory extend to the west side of Crescent Creek?
No, it does not.
Not at all?
No.
Okay. Could it?
Yes, there are property owners there who've actually approached the city and said that they have some interest in expansion, and either in easement and or selling their wetland portion of their properties to us, not generally the higher value section where their home is. But yes, the park boundaries could be adjusted, and that is a consideration, especially given that there are properties outside the park, outside the city right now that people associate with the park. You probably know that a parcel was purchased from the Miller family, and that is outside city limits, and it's never really been incorporated into the park. It's a pasture right now, leads down to the creek.
Yeah.
Yes, so to answer your question, park boundaries should be really considered for what is optimal given the optimal needs and interest of the community in the area.
I only asked because I was just recently in the Muir Woods in San Francisco. I don't know if anyone's been there, but it's one of the outstandingly beautiful places of the world. And I was reminded how cool it would be to be able to go back and forth across, have that be a looped walk with bridges over it,
Wow.
in the way that Muir Woods did it, in a much smaller scale, but nonetheless.
Good for you.
There are old cedars back there, and it would be beautiful to be able to have that as a nature trail. That's something that is missing in Gig Harbor parks.
I would thank Luis. I love you sharing that vision and your examples from other parks that you think are worthy. That's another thing parks commissioners are please encouraged to do. And if you're ever interested in meeting me on site, I do that. August, the consultant will meet people on site. We'll do some touring if anybody's interested. I'm excited to show off the work that our Rotary group recently did with the clearing of ivy, knowing that there's interest in getting more creek access.
Once upon a time back, I don't know, a few years ago, there was talk of, with the acquisition of those lands, like doing the boardwalk along the edge of it. And yeah, but I mean, just visions at this point and conversations, but yeah, that has been talked about, and how that might come a reality. Any last comments? Yes.
Last comment, if we're talking about the west side of the creek, and I'm going to just keep harping on the bridge or removal of the culvert and the bridge, but you also have that forested area that's on the harbor side, on the west side of the creek. There's a strip through there. I don't know whether that's I've always looked at that and thought, if there was a way to integrate that into the park in addition to the other land property you're talking about, Luis, and then with the bridge, that would be an amazing kind of tie into the harbor, and yet also that kind of the estuarine area there. Maybe it'd be a fantastic thing. But okay, I'm done.
There, I have to say one thing, there's a muskrat family that lives down there where you're talking about, Will, and the kids love to paddle down there on the team. Like in the summer, the development kids go down there to see if they can see the babies, and they're always around. And it's always, that's one of those pieces where the natural beauty of Gig Harbor is available to a wide variety of people in a way that they just wouldn't if they weren't out there in our beautiful natural spaces.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's also one of the kind of just a handful of undeveloped shoreline, and that's one of the areas that'll strip there. I don't think it's been developed ever. So great.
And how close does that strip go towards, because the city owns a parcel at the very end of, what drive is that?
Wheeler,
Oh.
Wheeler.
Wheeler. Yeah, they own that very tip there, the water access there, don't they?
Yes, we do.
Oh,
It's actually a very wet surface. So I've had people ask me, could we put our boats there? Could we put up a rack? And the challenge is it's underwater
Right.
quite often.
Gotcha.
it's very easy to get caught there on a windy day too.
Yeah, muddy.
I've seen those paddle boats that get rented out, literally getting towed out of that area on a super windy day. But there's octopi or octopuses that live down there. We, went paddling through there, and there were little octopus that followed us. And so, yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff right in that area.
Nice.
Thank you for
All
this.
right. Yeah, thank you. That was a good conversation. But I think it'd probably be best that we move on to the next business item of park survey form. Luis, you gonna recap us on that guy, and maybe I think we might be due to revisit this and maybe update us. I think last we did this was a couple of years ago. So Luis is gonna provide us a little more information on that. And
Yeah, so for Les and Stace, who are not aware, we were trying to do a park survey. The commissioners were trying to do a park survey in the absence of a park manager at the time to sort of see where the parks were at. And so I did a fairly elaborate, just a Google survey form, but it allowed any of us to go down to any park and record what we saw. And it was broken out in things like visibility and condition of the park and facility, what facilities are available, what facilities do they need? Like, does this park need another bench or something along those lines? Could be anything. So we did that. We all divvied up the parks and went out to 3 or 4 parks and did the survey, because we couldn't all get to all of the parks in the time allowed. And it produced a significant spreadsheet and a bunch of charts that the Google survey people nicely do for us. We didn't have to do extra work on that. But the idea was to be able to continue to use that. And that, again, any of us can go out and just use this app on our phone. It was on your phone and very easy to carry about and check off boxes that you or make a comment on the park that you're at. And then that could be utilized by Matthew or whoever at the city to see, we could see how things were changing over time, because maybe some park asset is degrading, or maybe we're working on that park and it's getting better. And so it does need updating now. I don't even remember, was Ansich, well, Ansich must have been in, but it wasn't complete then. So there's still a few things that need to be updated. And then it was specific to who could use it by commissioner name. So I would need to update that as well. Ben, we did talk about it. I realized I didn't really do it, but we were going to sort of circulate it again for comment. Is that what we were going to do? And then I would edit it?
yeah, we were gonna, that sounds good. And then we hopefully be able to, get this finished by, I don't know, end of summer, I think would be plenty enough time. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and send it out, and then, no, wait, you did send it out, didn't you? Yeah, you did send it out.
Yes, but I think like, for instance, lesson stays weren't there. So the old commissioners are still, the commissioners from 2 years ago are who's on the drop down. And then Matthew, it does have a parks manager generic drop down, and there is a city council generic drop down as well for who's doing the survey. We did not intend it. It was never my intent for it to be something that the public would do. I guess that's possible, but it would be very klutzy for the public. And I don't know what their expectations would be about what action steps were going to take place, because they said this park needs a bench, that implied some immediate action on the city's part. But I do think it could be a useful tool for us. And if it turns out to be too unwieldy, because it is a little long, if it's unwieldy, we'll change it, right? My ego's not overly in it for editing purposes, right? You can suggest changes and it won't hurt my feelings. It's intended to be a tool for us, so I want it to work for us. So I will get it out to the two of you, though I'm not know how I can do that. How do I do that? Terry, do you have it now, or Matthew, do you, from that email? I did do that a couple meetings ago.
Yeah. I definitely have access to it. It's a good question if I'd have the ability to assign permission and access to others.
Actually, okay, gentlemen, I will get your emails from Ben and then send it to you directly.
Right.
We'll get there.
Okay.
And so were you looking for comments immediately, or is it?
Well, I'm going to Europe for a month, so no.
Arrivederci.
So I will be back 4th of July weekend. So if we've sent it out, if you had a chance to just go to a park, any park, and run through it, and then that'll make you familiar with how it works. It's easy, just keep going. And you don't have to answer any question that isn't asterisked. And there's only a couple of those, like name and date and what park you're at. But other than that, if something doesn't apply, because of course Ansich is nothing like the stairs at the end of the harbor, which is nothing like Crescent Creek. So if something doesn't apply, just move on. Just go hit the next button and keep going. And click submit at the end, or it doesn't get to me. And the city, Terry has permission, I know, to has the back entrance to be able to pull the spreadsheet and look at the results. And Jeff had pulled it a couple of times, I think.
Okay, so yeah, we'll get them familiar with it, get everybody an opportunity to run through it at least once, and then hopefully. So Luis, are you going to miss our next meeting then?
No, because I think our meeting must be the 6th.
6th,
right?
Yeah.
So I'll be back, but I just won't be here for any planning before. But I'm not being very good about planning before anyway, so you won't notice any change.
Okay, so moving forward with this then, so next meeting we can look forward to assigning maybe the parks, and then we'll do the survey throughout the summer, and then come back with information maybe in the fall on kind of where we're at with the assessments and stuff like that.
Sure. And it'll be good to see from 2 years ago to now, what's changed, and the survey is sortable by that. We can drill down on a certain park or on a certain aspect. Any aspect can be compared to any other aspect. So it's pretty flexible.
Nice. Yeah, so we got that baseline set from a couple of years ago, and then we'll kind of see where we're at. And, this information might be useful in the next pros plan, writing the next pros plan, and, the effectiveness of public works and where our maintenance standards might be, or where we could formulate some park standards there. And so, yeah, there's a lot of information that, be derived from this. So I do look forward to using this tool. So again, Luis, I know I've said it before, but thank you for taking the time to develop this.
No problem.
So yeah, if you get an opportunity, she'll send it to you, run through it, get yourself a little familiar with it, and then we'll put it to use over the summer here. We'll divvy up parks at our next meeting then. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to I guess, the process. Okay, next, Luis, you all good? Anything else
Yep.
on that one?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, so next, new business item number 4, election of officers. I know we are kind of running up against the clock here, and then there's still a Parks Manager report and advisory committee report to give. So I'm happy to table this till next meeting, or we can go ahead and follow through with the election of officers either way. Not that I'm trying to retain power or anything, but I mean, this doesn't take long. I guess we'll go ahead and do it. Election officers is, so what we'll do is we'll do, you know, a nomination. If anybody would like to nominate themselves or somebody else to be chair or vice chair, we'll do chair first, and then we'll just take a vote on it. And, you know, maybe that person wants to provide any information on what their, you know, background is, or what, you know, why they might want to do that, and we'll take a vote on it. So I would like to nominate Luis as chair of the Parks Commission. If she,
Really?
yeah, absolutely.
But what about you?
What about me? I mean, I'm happy to continue doing it. You know, I've been chair of the Parks Commission for 3 years, and, you know, I feel like I mean, I'm happy to continue doing it. You know, I'm familiar with it, and I haven't missed many meetings, but Luis, you know, you've been on the Parks Commission for a few years now as well, and, you know, I think you do a great job, but, you know, like you said, you're going out of Europe, so I don't know if it doesn't fit with your timeline. I understand that. But is there any other nominations? Or looks like Stephanie has her hand up.
I was just gonna nominate you, Ben, to be the chair. And I don't know if I can do a double nomination, but I would nominate you to be the chair, and I would nominate Louise to be the vice chair. But I don't know if you can do doubles like that, so.
Well, let's just start with maybe the chair. Thank you. Is there, I'm like I said, I'm happy to continue doing it. I'm very happy. I feel like I'm getting okay at it now. I don't know if I'm great, but I feel like I'm getting okay at it.
Right now that you're just in practice, you can't let it go now.
Fair.
So Luis, is
So-
that you declining the nomination?
It's almost, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Because the fact is that I am buried in Metro Park stuff, and it is hard to break away. I've been missing the preparatory, let's do the agenda meetings, because I just, it's conflicting with a bunch of other things, and it's difficult. So Ben's schedule is a lot.
And
more-
we're volunteers. We're
Right.
volunteers.
Yes.
So-
I don't, I would love to do it in the future, but I'm not sure that I can do it right now.
Fair enough.
So
Well,
I'm
know
going
that
to
I think
gracefully
you do a great job.
decline. Thank you very much for your lovely offer or nomination, Ben, but no.
So if we need a second before we vote, I second the nomination, I guess. I don't know, is that appropriate, Joshua, or is there a second required, or is it just nomination and a vote?
No second required.
Okay. Say any other nominations? All right, let's put it to a vote. All in favor of voting Ben Coronado, Parks Commission Chair again?
Aye.
Aye.
Woo!
All right.
Just so you guys know, I'm almost running out of battery power, so I'm like, got my video off and every window closed because I don't have my power cord with me, so my vote is aye. That's why the hands are
Stephanie,
raised.
you've used that excuse before, Stephanie. I think this is your second time with the power cord thing.
Well, I guess I didn't expect the meeting to go so long, so I should bring the power cord with me, but
Oh,
I'm not
please,
at home,
Stephanie,
I'm
they
at the
always go
office, but-
long.
I know.
I know.
I know. I'll come
Total eye
prepared next
roll.
time. Okay.
All right, Luis, I'm gonna nominate you for vice chair then.
Okay, that I'm good with.
All right. Any other nominations for vice chair? Or self-nominations?
Georgina, do you have an interest at this time?
No, I don't. No, I would love it if you continue on. That's great.
Will, any interest?
No, thank you for asking, though. I'm still a rookie, fresh at this. You guys are doing a
All
great
right.
job. So great leadership.
We're looking at you for next one though.
Yeah.
All right, all in favor of voting Louise Seaman as vice chair of the Parks Commission?
Hi.
Thank you.
Aye. All right, Louise.
My pleasure.
Congratulations. Parks update report with Matthew.
Thanks. You do have a written report on a lot of public works projects. And I could highlight one or two. One is that the home port is actually due this week to have 60% construction drawings coming in. So we're far beyond the conceptual programming and all the work that went into a master plan level work. It's moving through public works, and they will have a public outreach to their acknowledged stakeholders, largely commercial fishermen, but I would be happy to introduce others to the process and make sure that they get noticed. But the 60% plans are coming in, and that's exciting to see. I don't believe that the city has all the funding for such an enormous project. It's over 3.3 million total cost. And I think part of it is getting the design plans really ready and the cost estimates absolutely clear so they can pursue federal funds and other grant funds, because it is a heavy lift to build the home port. But that's a big public works project I'm glad for you to know about. A smaller one, but also important to the community, is the honoring project at Austin Way. I know commissioners have been interested in that. I meant to say Austin Park, within the estuary. The honoring statue area has been prepped. Ecology blocks had been laid down for over a month to compress the soil. There's a little hiccup. Something is not quite enough for them to pour concrete. So it probably is going to keep getting delayed in terms of when does the site go under construction? When do we expect the statue? We'd like to be able to tell people and really get going on the public outreach and ceremony that it will be an exciting thing to ideally still have in the summer. But we can't relay a schedule until we can be more confident that they can start the pedestal construction and giving the site over to the hired contractors. The good news is everybody's committed to seeing it through. I'll be sure that the dates get out to you in the future, though. Let's hope for that as part of a great summer ahead, right? Previously at a previous board meeting, I mentioned that the Eden Boat House has given us their annual report, and there was interest among the commissioners to hear about that. Your time might be limited tonight. I'll just tell you, instead of sharing screenshots of it, it essentially explains that they are doing ongoing programming, things that a lot of you are familiar with, such as family boat making together. It's a family destination to go there and work on boats. But they are adding more and more classroom activities. And I think that's been exciting. I was pleased to be part of watching them open crew school, where they did things at the boathouse, but they also went ahead and used the net shed at Ansich Park, which is pretty much adjacent, walkable. And they were able to learn about net repair within the net shed itself. There's been some interest in how do you use that net shed appropriately. Commercial fishermen is its priority. That was a great use in my mind when the Eden Boat realized that there was an asset right there to go and do net training on. And they have probably 6 different courses throughout the year now. In their annual report, they document that they have 3 full-time staff. They document that they have just as many volunteer hours as they have staff hours. So they leverage, basically 6 full-time employees throughout the year. They talk about their budget and their program numbers. They would like to be up in where they were in previous years before COVID, which is close to 6,000 participants. I think this last year was down to 800. But we'd like to think that they're coming back strong, especially as they introduce more crew schools and other things. The Eden Boat report's going to council, so of course that's a public record and something the commissioners happily can get their hands on if you're keen to know more. Tomorrow is farmers market down at Eden Boat at Scansea. I think a lot of you knew that. One of the cool things that we coordinate is the Veteran will be arriving and being docked. That's a boat that's got a historic record in Gig Harbor, but the Veteran will be there at our dock. It is a reserved spot. We have to coordinate that with the states, and state funds went into our docks rehabilitation. I only say that stuff because I appreciate you as stewards of some of our grants and stewards of our assets. I know it's a city aspect, but I welcome commissioners as community representatives of our parks and Therefore, I want you to know, like, yeah, that gets coordinated. My battery is running low too, folks. That's my excuse. I'll tell you, we were busy doing an open house for the sports complex that happened recently. Then there was a study session on the sports complex that followed 2 weeks later. That was on the 26th of May to City Council. You may have seen that it is a recorded study session. There is a real push by the city to put that out as a public outreach item, is for people to hear the study session where questions were asked from a lot of different perspectives and from council members. And then there was input from staff where our interim city administrator spoke to some creative approaches to phase 2 and phase 3 of the sports complex. So that was quite relevant probably to you. I think our time is too short for me to get into it. I'd like you to know that Bike Bash was a lot of fun at Samel Park. I went there on the 21st. You might recall a lot of bicycle interest. Marlene was there and she said, I want your commissioners on bicycles. So she didn't forget her invitation to do bike riding. She did a few out of Bike Bash on that Saturday. I staffed a table along with Gig Harbor Police, who was there with his bicycle, and mostly we visited with young people, but it was a gorgeous day and good outreach for the idea that we are committed to our trails and to a non-motorized transportation as well. Upcoming item is the Garden Club. Gig Harbor Garden Club is going to be hosting their weekend, the 25th and 26th tours of gardens, and they raise money for literacy. So I was really pleased to meet them and learn more about what they do. They will be at Wilkinson Farm that weekend. So don't be surprised by signage, and volunteers will be coordinating parking of cars the way Ben did on Parks Appreciation Day. They will be, people probably up to 25 cars at a time will be coming in and out of the site to do touring of the community garden as part of Garden Club Exposure Day. I don't know if I hit everything, but that's where I'll leave it for now, and I'll take questions.
Will has a question.
Thanks. I got 3 wrote down here. So at some point, just would like an update. I saw in the notes on the phase 2, the extension of the contract, I guess, for the property acquisition on the conservation property. It was extended to June 1. Today is June 1.
Of course.
I'm really curious, like, where that's at, and maybe an update at our next meeting on kind of where that all sits. I know I also read that we pulled some of the grant applications because we didn't have really well-defined projects, et cetera. So that's one.
And Will, I'd like to answer that. I think that's
sure.
Yeah. So thanks for bringing up phase 2, the North Creek Salmon Heritage Conservation Area. As the commission's becoming more and more aware that we're going through a phased approach, but we are pursuing right now, we have an 11-acre first phase done, and it's acquired and closed. So congratulations to the city on that property. Phase 2 and phase 3 are being pursued. Phase 2 has already been recommended and with an intended allocation of funds. The phase 2, though, we don't yet own. And as Will just pointed out, we extended the contract to June 1st. We were trying to negotiate over 2 different appraisal values, 2 different appraisal processes. And what the sellers agreed to was to extend the contract further. They did a 60-month extension at this time so that we could come up with a 3rd appraisal. It seemed like there was not enough interest at the start to go down the path of doing another appraisal, just to you might say, to bicker over price. But we are really excited that the city to try to get this property, and we think it's worth doing another attempt. So that is where we are. The appraisal that gets done might double as a review appraisal, meeting the county's requirement for the funds ultimately, that there be a review appraisal. So I'm hoping to get a qualified county appraiser in that meets that and can ideally bridge some of the differences, not value so much, but just understandings of the property, and present it as the very best price we can. The council was very clear to present the highest price that we can for as-is property. We are not allowed to pay above that. So the seller's starting to understand that, and I think show us the idea that you're making a good faith effort to assure the appraisal is done and reviewed, and that you will offer the best price. We'll still see if that gets accepted. Extension on that contract. Phase 3 is the one project that has not yet been to county council for approval. Only the county executive has recommended it. We're very excited they recommended it. We asked for 50% of $1 million purchase price. I can pretty much say that now publicly. The sellers are very much wanting it to go to the city, and they're willing to extend throughout the summer while we wait for the county. So we're expecting the county to meet on phase 3 officially in August now. And that is for Conservation Futures phase 3 funding. There is a small tie to phase 2, and that's one of the reasons why I'm really relieved to tell you that the sellers of phase 2 extended and will continue to wait for ideally us to have come to a new agreement.
Okay, I've got 2 other quick questions. Are we going to move forward with Adopt the Park trial period for 1 year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Super excited about that. And then I would ask that we still try to entertain the opportunity for folks to go out and collect and harvest native plants from the Gig Harbor Sports Complex property before they clear that property. I don't know if that can be coordinated with people doing it at the Wilkinson Farms. I personally am a big believer in that. I do it when I get the opportunity, and this is just going out onto the property and harvesting, small trees, young plants, native plants for transplanting onto other locations, up to and including Parks property. I don't know if that's an opportunity or not, but you get one chance before the whole thing's just ground up and turned into compost. So that's it.
That's great. This is stuff I'm just adding into Will's comments, and I will say that we're putting in we're adding to the native plantings around the museum. So if anyone wants to, we have a plant list and stuff, but if there's opportunity to dig in, transplant to this site, that can be a part of the big plan if we wanted to do it. I do have a question for Matthew, who probably went off to get his power cord, but how does one get your event listed on the magic list at the end of the parks plan? Because we're having an event on August 20th. We have all of the permits in place. There will be some minor impact on Donkey Creek potentially and Austin. So just wanted to get that on the radar screen. I'll send, Josh, do I send the information to you and then you send it to Matt, or do I send it directly to Matt?
Where is the information going to be posted?
Well, this is the History Rocks event that's happening at the museum, and there's a list of events at the end of the parks works plan. And I'm just asking how to get that event listed so that the commission is aware that since we're in between 2 parks, I want to just make sure that people are aware that that's happening.
Is that the pros plan that's listed in?
No, it was in the works plan that was in the packet today.
Oh, okay.
It's just an upcoming special events schedule.
Yeah,
It's just
and
in the
most
packet.
of them list a park that is part of or being used or impacted in some way. Because there's weddings listed and there's all that stuff. So anyway, I'm just wondering, do I send that directly to Matt, or should I send it to Josh and then have it sent to Matt?
That sounds like it can go directly to Matt. I think it's just a administrative thing that he does. I don't think I've seen that document, so I'm not sure what it's for.
Okay. Yeah, it was basically the list of parks work projects or something. And then there was a long list of events at the end of that. And it was in the packet for this meeting.
Matt, is that just prepared for the Parks Commission's benefit, or is that a public document somewhere?
It's for the Parks Commission benefit, if Terry wanted to comment more, but it's just the list of upcoming events in our parks.
Oh, okay.
I got a question for you, Matthew. Can you give us maybe a slight update on, I know the roundabout's open, and so do they have a timeline of the parking spots associated with the Eden boat or the Eden house?
They do not have a timeline that I've heard yet. I'd be happy to pursue that. I've heard only that substantial work still needs to be done on Eden boat site for the parking that's required. What substantial is, I can't say, but The contractor has a window of about 14 to 20 days to come back and finish striping. They had to wait for that. So I think we're going to see them try to finish all work and within 3 weeks of now, in which case the occupancy can then go forward for the brick house. If you're not familiar, everybody, there's the historic family home, a brick home right on Edinburgh Park property, and that has been rehabilitated and it will be used for public programming. It'll be run by the Edinburgh House, but there will be there's an assurance that 50% of the days of the year will go to public access for public programming. And the example I may have used already in front of you was the Girl Scouts are looking for a place to meet. It's small, probably intimate meetings within a home setting. It's not a large assembly, but it's a great spot for its decks and its views in the middle of a park. So if I answered your question, Ben, I think it's within a month, but they haven't said that specifically.
Okay.
And then planting will follow?
Do you mean replanting around the new retaining walls?
Yes, I mean, there's lots of bare dirt there now, and it's looking much better. I mean, it's all power to everyone's hard work there. But there's clearly lots of planting to be done.
Right, and I think, yeah, you're talking mostly about sod.
I saw the planting plan a few months ago, and it included shrubbery and flowers and some new trees. They were going to put in a new pear tree, right?
Well, it turns they were able to save the pear, the historic pear that's there. So I think that was assuming the pear had to go, but it didn't. Okay. Thankfully. Woo-hoo. Yeah, no, it's a historic landscape to be protected. But I'm glad you brought up a planting plan associated probably with the Rotary itself, and I'd like to review that. I haven't seen it.
I know where there's some native plants we could put on that site.
Any other question on your projects from Matthew? Thank you, Matthew. All right, we'll go and move on to the committee reports, the Climate Change Advisory Board. Georgina.
Okay, and I'm muted. So this was an introductory meeting that allowed everyone to learn more about the backgrounds of the committee members and also receive information on the purpose of the committee, which is to learn about climate change topics, including state and regional requirements, draft an amendment to the comprehensive plan to incorporate climate change policy into the plan and acknowledge that climate change exists, and to include a climate legislative process. Future meetings will be as follows. June 8th will cover regional approaches to climate change. June 22nd will address buildings and energy. July 13th will explore transportation and land use. July 27th will cover state issues, waste, and community engagement. August 23rd will be a review of a draft comprehensive plan amendment. We also discussed future projects that would include a climate action plan, a comprehensive plan element, and ongoing climate change body, climate change projects, and implementation plans. There was also a review of climate change terms and glossary, which included anthropogenic, the process of or result generated by humans, climate adaptation, adjustment of natural or human systems to the changing environment, climate change, significant changes in global temperature, environmental justice, the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, greenhouse gases, GHGs, increased presence of these gases in the atmosphere, naturally occurring, but now human-driven, mitigation, reduction, resilience, a capability to anticipate and respond. We also discussed what impacts we can expect in our ecosystem, which would include king tide changes, less snow, earlier snowmelt, heavier rains, stream flow disruptions, wildfires, and drought. We also shared information about climate policies from other organizations or cities that have been implemented successfully, and we will continue to add to those ideas. We also selected from a long list of areas that we thought were key issues for climate change mitigation. The one I chose was parks, recreation, and open space. And I talked about climate adaptation and how steps can be taken now to prepare for future climate conditions, especially for hotter weather. We should be focusing on drought-tolerant plants, low-flow water use in irrigation, and more shaded areas in the parks. Also, there needs to be more wildfire mitigation for the woodland open space. And the plan to have an urban forest management plan will go a long way to creating safer natural areas in Gig Harbor. We will also be talking about what we've heard from the public on climate change. I was thinking that perhaps we can encourage the public to use public comment in our Parks Commission meetings to provide us with their concerns and ideas for how to address climate change in our park system. So I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but I think it's a very important part of this. There was discussion about emergency alert systems that are dedicated to providing the public with information on fires and storms that may impact them, and the need for getting the city's emergency evacuation policies in the hands of individual citizens. Carl DeSimas mentioned the Pierce County Health Planning Interest Group that meets quarterly, and he mentioned the interconnectedness of the jurisdictions, how one city's actions can impact other cities. Is the report. It was very interesting. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thanks for attending that, Georgina. And thanks for being part of that commission, bringing that information back to us. That sounded like a good amount of meetings on that schedule coming up. So we look forward to a few more reports. If you have any issue making any of those, feel free to let me know. I'll be happy to sit in for you.
You will sit in, you're myself.
But yeah, so any questions for Georgina on any of the information she was able to relay for us? It sounds like it was a nice introductory one with a lot of information.
That was great. Went really
Yeah.
well.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Look forward.
Chair, I would just ask that maybe keep your ears open for any discussions on street trees and recommendations with respect to that and the incorporation of those into the public works infrastructure or the streets infrastructure.
Street trees, as in increasing our canopy.
Right. Yeah. Canopy in urban areas. Yep. Outside of
That's-
parks, but just they'll probably talk about it.
Right, that urban forest management plans can be really helpful. They're going to measure the canopy, which should be, a good base for us to understand, And then I know that there's concern about getting replacement trees for those that are going to be taken down from the sports complex to replace those somewhere in the city. I know a lot of cities that do that very successfully. So.
And Matthew, or maybe Georgina, do you know if with the urban canopy plan, if they decided whether they're going to do an assessment or an inventory?
I'll defer to you, Matt.
I believe it's an assessment. The inventory of all urban trees is much more involved. I don't believe they were going that route.
Okay. That was it. Yeah, thanks again. Appreciate that, Georgina. Appreciate your attendance. Yeah, so there's a few more of those on the docket that Georgina will be bringing that information back to us with the process they're going through and everything like that. So look forward to a few more reports from her and how we can, incorporate. And thank you for offering our, meetings as a platform for, comments regarding this information that, I think we're a good avenue for that as well. So thank you for offering that.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other business or conversation or topics or? No? All right. I know we're half an hour behind schedule. Sorry, Josh. I move that we adjourn tonight's meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Bye.
Bye.
Aye. All right. You guys have a good evening.
You too.